Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to go over how to securely store data on mobile apps. If you're ready to get started, then stay tuned. Let's learn together. Alright, so this video is going to be a little bit different from our normal format of just being inside the code. This is going to be a little more high level, a little more theoretical because we're dealing with security stuff and we're not going to actually implement anything today. We're just going to go over the knowledge of what we actually need to do in order to implement this in the right way. So, getting started. The best way to store sensitive data in an app? Just don't. Don't do it. The reason that Apple always says only ask for the permissions and privacy things that you only need, don't ask for any more that you need, is because that is genuinely the easiest way to secure something, is just to never have access to it in the first place. There's something that I like to say when I'm talking about security, and that is anything made by man can be broken by man, meaning that even if you've got the best security in the world, eventually somebody's going to figure out how to get into it, and they'll be able to hack into something. That's just generally the way that it works. So again, this is a little tongue-in-cheek here, but yes, the best way to deal with sensitive data in your app is just never have it in the first place. That isn't always a real-life use case, though. So let's go over the things that we kind of have to watch out for first before we go over some more real-life examples. So these things are bad. Don't do these things. So don't store data like the secure data that you want in your code. So that any kind of, and when we say data here, we're talking about anything like passwords, credit card numbers, any personally identifiable information, API keys, stuff like that. So just don't store that data in your code in the first place. That is not secure and it is not safe. Don't store it in a config file. This goes for anything iOS and Android. Again, don't store it in a plist. That's the same thing as a config for iOS. Also, don't store it in any kind of plain text storage. So that means don't store anything in user defaults or core data if you're in iOS, or if you're in Android. Don't put anything in the data store or in a room database. Now, as a caveat on the Android side, there actually are ways to encrypt data stores and room databases. However, by default, they're not encrypted. So if you don't know if you are or are not encrypting them, you're probably not encrypting them by default, which means it's not safe to store those there. Another thing that you'll hear a lot of people talk about is security by obscurity, or another word that you may hear is obfuscation. Now, all that means is you're just trying to hide the keys, but you're not actually doing anything to really hide the keys. It's kind of silly. For example, you may say, oh, well, I'm going to minify all of my Kotlin code, or I'm going to minify a bunch of JavaScript, and then it'll make it really hard to find. No, it won't. You're still putting the plain text keys in your code, and that's never safe. That's never an okay thing to do. That's not secure. It's not a great way to store stuff. And that actually brings us to our next point. Encryption and encoding are not the same thing. For example, you may hear people talk about JWT. Now, a JWT stands for JSON Web Token, and it's something that you pass back and forth as part of an authentication process usually. Usually you see that kind of thing for like signing in and signing out of certain services. But encoding, anyone can decode that object, and encryption requires a key, which means theoretically only the key holder should be able to decrypt that thing and read the value. So for example, let's just jump into the browser for a second. So we will go over here into our simple keychain that we used in a recent video. And let's go ahead and let's jump into the console here and just do a quick example. So let's make this text a little larger so we can read it. Cool. So if we take the text of hello world, and we can use BTOA, which is a function in JavaScript, to base64 encode, not encrypt, encode. You can see here it obfuscates that, which means we can very easily convert that back. So for example, if we say ATOB, and then we copy our string that was printed out here, and we paste it right back in. All right, well, it looks like there's a scam warning when we try to copy and paste. So let's just try it ourselves. Didn't work. Okay, so we'll just type it out. Cool. So SGV SBG 8 SIH DVCMXKIQ equals. Cool. As you can see, we were able to convert that string back into hello world like we started with. And it actually looks like our I wasn't capitalized, so let's see if we can fix that and get our exclamation point to work. Perfect. There we go. Helps if you always type things correctly. So this is an example of obfuscation and encoding. So as you can see here, if we were to pass this string, it's not really human readable. You could look at that and say, I don't know what our super secret password is. However, if you know that BTOA is the JavaScript way to base64 encode something, and that ATOB, which is just BTOA backwards, is the way to decode that same thing, then you can turn it right back into the string that you had before. And so the thing that you thought was a super secret code, actually not super secret at all. And that's why encoding is actually not safe for securely storing any kind of data. You want to actually encrypt it, where you require cryptographic algorithms and keys in some shape, form, or fashion, which Keychain for iOS will actually give you, and we covered that in a recent video. And if you encrypt your data store or your room database, then that's a similar way to do it on the Android side. So now, the alternatives for real life. Like we said earlier, never having access to a key is actually not very doable in a real life scenario. So what are the best ways to handle that? Well, we can use servers to make the request instead of putting that key on a mobile app, which is like handing an entire copy of your app, including everything that's in there. So if you've got your keys stored in there, that means you are giving a copy of all your keys to every person that downloads your app. So that's why we don't want to store it inside of our app. And we could use it in the server here, particularly in the BFF pattern. That is a great way to deal with server requests. So the BFF pattern stands for backend for front end. And that's a really cool way to be able to say, actually, I want all my logic done on the backend side of things. And then whenever we send it to the mobile apps, then that is just basically a UI view for everything that's going on in the server. And that's a really common pattern for mobile development nowadays. So another way to deal with this is if you must have the key on the device, try to always make sure you pull it from the server before each use and only hold on to it long enough to use it. That's the next best way. So the reason we want to try to pull it from the server before each use is because that way if anything happens, say for example, a hacker got access to the key some way, somehow, you could easily rotate that key. Now, rotating a key just essentially means you're asking your third-party service provider for that new key. Because in the case of API keys, for example, they are generally fairly easy to deal with and fairly easy to generate a new key if the need arises. And if you're pulling it from a server before each use in your mobile app, then rotating the key is a really easy way to make sure that if something does happen, you can easily change that key out. Now, if you do have to store it on the device, like we said earlier, you want to make sure it's encrypted, not encoded, encrypted. And again, that example, Keychain for iOS, or an encrypted data store, or room database for Android. And with that, we've gone over a few different ways to store sensitive data securely in your mobile app. And with that, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And if you leave a comment, just be nice about it. That's all I ask. Thanks. Have a great day.